table that I think we can all learn from. So what I would like to do today is share some of my experiences as a member of Fountain House. But before I do that, I want to say one quick thing. I do not define myself by my mental illness. That is simply a diagnosis that was given to me by a doctor some 12 years ago. The way that I see myself when I look in the mirror is as follows. I see myself as a filmmaker and a journalist. I see myself as a small businessman working with a colleague and friend to begin a business of pet care in New York City. I am a teacher and mentor. I am a facilitator and an administrator. I am a mental health advocate and human rights activist, and I am a devoted son to my father and my family. I am a friend and a colleague. And the reason why I wanted to start off that way was because I wanted to demonstrate what happens to someone like myself who comes to Fountain House and the changes that can take place within our community. First of all, Fountain House saves lives. It saved mine and many, many more. But what it also does is something that I think is quite unique and special and maybe even magical. It transforms lives. So all of the things I just mentioned are possible, not 100% and solely due to Fountain House, but because of the richness of our community, that all of us bring something within these four walls in New York City. So what I would like to do is take a few minutes to share some of my stories that I hope will illustrate how the Fountain House model can be used and applied everywhere in the world. As was mentioned earlier, there were about 400 clubhouses, save for Antarctica, and over 100,000 members, I believe, worldwide. But that's not good enough, at least not for me. So one of the things that happened about 2 years ago is Alan, who I considered not just a colleague but a friend, asked me to join him to go on a trip to Australia. Believe me, I was quite overjoyed to say yes. Not just because I wanted to go see Australia, but I wanted to go see what happens in other clubhouses around the world. So the first conference there was a training-based conference based in Brisbane, where I got to see another clubhouse and how they do their work and how they create an intentional working community. But also, what was even more important was the second conference, which was about a 2-hour drive from Brisbane to Toowoomba, which is a small city in Australia. And they were putting on a regional conference from clubhouses all over Southeast Asia, from Korea and Japan, Hong Kong. We had a delegation from Indonesia come to the conference. And I gave a presentation that was entitled Leadership in Our Community, Building and Developing Relationships. And I know Alan has mentioned relationships today and other times in his conversations with many different people, that is one of the core essences of Fountain House is relationships. We cannot do everything on our own, regardless of whether we have a mental illness diagnosis or not. So in the course of this 10-minute presentation at a workshop that I was part of, when I was finished, the response that I got was somewhat overwhelming and interesting to see and witness. Because in that role of my presentation, giving that presentation, I was teaching and I was mentoring other members who did not even consider the possibility of being a leadership in their community. A second opportunity came up at a later date. And that was when, about a year ago, in conversations with Alan and others, that we wanted to create a newsletter that focused on innovative ways of finding, to provide jobs for members, whether that would be what we call a transitional employment job, or a full-time job, what we call independent work, or something else such as a social cooperative. And it sat on his desk for some period of time. And finally I said to Alan, I said, well, why don't I just take responsibility for this project? Why do we have to wait for you to say, oh, Cyrus, you do this, or Cyrus, you do that? I said, no, I'll do this. So what I was able to do with the help of others, such as Denise and Luke Terry and other individuals, we were able to put together our first newsletter on employment innovations in the Clubhouse world. And then we were able to do a second edition. And we just completed the third. And what is, again, unique about this is that no one was telling me what I had to do. This was a conscious choice that I made on my own to take ownership and responsibility for something that I considered was extremely important, finding ways to employ people with mental illness. Now, as Alan mentioned earlier, I do have a job, a part-time job, working at a prestigious law firm, Baker McKenzie, which is worldwide. And I have a wonderful relationship with my supervisor and the attorney that I work for. Now, when I have been there for over 4.5 years now. And when the opportunity 2 years ago came to go to Australia, I asked my supervisor, can I go to Australia? Now, in most normal situations, if you said, oh, I want to go to Australia and give a seminar, most employers would look at you like you were crazy, but not in this particular instance. In this instance, my supervisor and the attorney we worked for said, go, do what needs to be done, because they understood through relationships that we had developed working together side by side in a law firm, not within the confines of the four walls of a clubhouse, but outside the clubhouse. And I think that's what's key to the success of Fountain House, is that it's not just something that takes place within a room or a building or a city. It takes place in community. And community can be defined in many, many different ways. And the opportunity to be able to represent Fountain House and Clubhouse was something that not only I couldn't pass up, but that my supervisor didn't want me to lose out on. The third opportunity, and I just want to take a step back for a moment. Alan had mentioned place, a place that people can come to help each other overcome the difficulties and challenges of severe mental illness. But that place, as I just mentioned, working at Baker and McKenzie, is not necessarily within the confines of the building. The employment innovator is on the internet. That's global in scope. So when we're looking at the possibilities that exist for people to recreate their lives, I never in my wildest imagination thought that I would be an editor of a newsletter. So my last story is about starting a small business. Now, a friend of mine had come to me and presented an idea. And the idea was to start a dog walking business in Manhattan, New York City. Now, we both did some research into the numbers because there are lots of dogs in New York City. There's over 600,000 dogs, and they all need to be taken care of. And someone needs to look after them when their owners are at work or at school or traveling. So what I was going to bring to the business was not dog walking, which I've done in a previous life, but I was going to bring my skills and talents as a web designer and someone who has had various business experiences over the course of my life, 53 years. So I was more of the idea man, and he was the one who was going to walk the dogs. And we had two other partners with us. Unfortunately, they had to bow out, but we don't see that as a failure. Because in the process of putting this business together, My friend Kurt has been in contact with a very successful business owner. She has her own dog walking business in Manhattan, and she's been giving him advice and giving him ideas. And with me, I bring some of that as well, but we're also in contact with another woman who provided material for a very nominal cost, very inexpensive cost, on how to start a business. And again, this was possible because Fountain House has what we call a social cooperative program. And through that program, it helps members start their own businesses. So I'm not the only business that's out there. And again, living in New York City, there are tremendous opportunities. And I see the same thing here in India. What a rich heritage you have. I mentioned earlier to someone, I don't remember off the top of my head, that coming to India was like coming home in a way, because I recognized the beauty and the love that you have. All of you are here for a specific reason. You're here because you really do care about other people. Whether it's someone in your own family, which is usually the way most of us come into something like Fountain House, but also because you see the suffering and pain and dismay of your fellow man and woman. And you want to take ownership and responsibility and change the world. And again, I think that's what Fountain House can help provide you, is a way to help create an environment, a place, not necessarily within 4 walls, because India is a big place, but outside of that. And I think working together, we can achieve great things. And I hope over this week that we'll have an opportunity to talk further about this. So I will end my presentation here and say thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. I'll